Believe it or not, in the earliest versions of Back to the Future, the time machine wasn't a sleek sports car, it was a refrigerator. The original concept had Doc Brown's invention built into a bulky, immobile appliance that required a nuclear blast to power the time jump. The climax was imagined at a desert test site where Marty would hitch a ride on a truck carrying the fridge into a government atomic explosion. But while the idea had a certain retro sci-fi charm, it was fraught with logistical and safety concerns. The filmmakers worried that children, inspired by the movie, might start climbing into refrigerators at home and potentially trap themselves. A horrifying risk that couldn't be ignored. Beyond that, the concept simply didn't flow with the energy and momentum the story needed. A stationary machine would make time travel feel passive and constrained, robbing the plot of its urgency. That's when the Delorean entered the picture. With its futuristic gull-wing doors, stainless steel frame, and cult-like status as a misunderstood vehicle, the Delorean wasn't just a car, it was a perfect metaphor for outcasts and dreamers. Once the script was rewritten around the Delorean, everything clicked. The car could be mobile, cinematic, and symbolic, elevating the film's energy and giving Marty the freedom to escape, race, and return across time in style. Before Back to the Future became a cultural phenomenon, it was a script that nobody wanted. Writers Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis spent years pitching the story to studio after studio, only to be turned away again and again. The rejection stemmed from the fact that the film didn't fit into the gritty, cynical mold of 1980s Hollywood. Studios didn't know what to make of a time travel movie that wasn't dystopian or overtly edgy. Many felt the story was too sweet, too sentimental, or simply confusing, especially with the controversial subplot involving Marty's mother having a crush on him. But the turning point came when Steven Spielberg, already a powerhouse in Hollywood, threw his weight behind the project. His name gave it instant credibility, and Universal Pictures finally agreed to greenlight the film. It was a risky move at the time, but Spielberg's belief in the script proved prophetic. The same story studios deemed too gentle for 1980s audiences would go on to redefine what a blockbuster could be, blending science fiction, comedy, adventure, and heart in a way no one had dared before. When production on Back to the Future first began, Eric Stoltz was firmly in the lead role as Marty McFly. Known for his intense and brooding performances, Stoltz approached the character with a method actor's dedication. He immersed himself in the role, insisted on being called Marty on set, and delivered each scene with a heavy emotional weight. But as filming progressed, nearly 5 weeks in, it became clear to the filmmakers that something was off. The tone of the movie they envisioned was light, fast-paced, and comedic. Stoltz, despite his talent, simply wasn't hitting the humor or charm needed to make the character lovable. Director Robert Zemeckis and producer Bob Gale agonized over the decision, but ultimately agreed that the film would suffer if they continued down this path. It was an extraordinary move, both risky and expensive. They would recast the lead. Michael J. Fox, their original choice but previously unavailable due to his commitment to family ties, suddenly became an option again after some creative scheduling negotiations. Stoltz was quietly let go, and Fox was brought in to reshoot all of Marty's scenes, an unprecedented mid-production switch that cost millions, but would prove to be the right call. Michael J. Fox's entry into Back to the Future didn't come with glamorous prep time or extended rehearsals. He was already starring in Family Ties, one of NBC's top sitcoms at the time, and contractual obligations meant he couldn't simply walk away. Instead, a brutal schedule was devised. Fox would shoot Family Ties from early morning until evening, then immediately head to the Back to the Future set, where he filmed scenes until 2 or 3 in the morning. He got by on adrenaline, caffeine, and a few hours of sleep snatched in between. But ironically, that physical and mental exhaustion shaped Marty McFly in ways no one could have predicted. His jittery energy, quick reactions, and frenzied facial expressions, now hallmarks of the character, were partially the result of sheer fatigue. Yet Fox never complained. His natural charisma lit up the screen, and the cast and crew quickly realized they'd found their Marty. Looking back, many involved in the production credit Fox's raw enthusiasm and professionalism for elevating the film from good to legendary. In the end, the grueling schedule paid off, and movie history was rewritten. When Michael J. Fox stepped into the role of Marty McFly, not everyone on set was immediately convinced it was the right choice, especially Leah Thompson, who played Marty's mother, Lorraine. Thompson had already spent several weeks building on-screen chemistry with Eric Stoltz, and during that time, the two had grown personally close. She viewed Stoltz as a serious, classically trained actor and respected his methodical approach. In contrast, Fox arrived with the reputation of a sitcom star, best known for his comedic timing on Family Ties. To Thompson, this seemed like a downgrade in emotional range and depth. There was skepticism, not just from her, but among a few cast members, about whether Fox could bring the complexity needed for the film's most awkward and absurd scenes, particularly the ones involving Lorraine unknowingly falling for her own son. But that skepticism didn't last. As filming resumed with Fox, Thompson began to see a different kind of brilliance emerge. Where Stoltz had delivered scenes with gravitas, Fox brought timing, instinct, and an infectious energy that lit up the set. His comedic delivery hit the right notes, but it was his relentless work ethic, shooting through exhaustion and never complaining, that earned Thompson's admiration. Their chemistry blossomed in a completely different direction. Less intense, but more dynamic and playful, which ultimately served the film better. By the end of filming, Thompson was not only convinced of Fox's talent, she was one of his biggest supporters. The role of Doc Brown, arguably one of the most iconic characters in cinema history, almost never had Christopher Lloyd's name attached to it. When he first received the script for Back to the Future, Lloyd quickly dismissed it. He skimmed a few pages, found the premise outlandish, and set it aside. To him, it felt too over the top, too cartoonish for his taste. But it was his wife who urged him to give it a second look, reminding him of how well Zemeckis had handled tonal balance in Romancing the Stone. Upon reading it again, this time with an open mind, Lloyd began to see the possibilities in the character. Doc Brown wasn't just a mad scientist, he was eccentric but brilliant, chaotic yet heartfelt. Trusting Zemeckis' vision and drawn to the character's expressive freedom, Lloyd accepted the role. The result was pure cinematic alchemy. His performance, full of wild gestures, frantic energy, and sudden eureka moments, became the heart of the franchise and solidified his place in film history. Before Claudia Wells became forever associated with Jennifer Parker, the sweet, loyal girlfriend of Marty McFly, the role originally belonged to someone else, Melora Hardin. When Eric Stoltz was cast as Marty, producers sought a co-star who visually complemented his stature and presence. Hardin, tall and poised, fit the bill perfectly. She was cast early in production and had already begun work on scenes when the film took a sudden and dramatic turn. After weeks of shooting, Stoltz was replaced by Michael J. Fox due to tonal issues. But with Fox came an unexpected logistical challenge: his shorter height. Suddenly, Hardin's physical presence no longer aligned with the new Marty. The contrast in height was stark enough to raise concerns that audiences might find it distracting or implausible for a teenage couple. It was an incredibly difficult decision, especially since Hardin had already invested emotionally in the project. But in the world of filmmaking, optics and chemistry can be make-or-break elements. The role was recast, and Claudia Wells, who was closer in height to Fox, was brought in. Wells had been the original choice but had been unavailable due to prior commitments. With her schedule cleared, she stepped into the role, bringing a warm, grounded energy that balanced Fox's kinetic performance. Although Jennifer's screen time in the first film was limited, her presence helped shape Marty's motivations and emotional core. For Hardin, it was a professional setback, but in interviews years later, she's spoken graciously about the experience, acknowledging that it was simply a case of the right fit for the final vision. The magic of Back to the Future wasn't just in the script or the special effects, it was in the cast. But that chemistry didn't materialize overnight. In fact, much of it was born out of initial tension. The sudden recasting of Marty McFly caused ripples among the cast, especially those who had already bonded with Eric Stoltz. Trust had to be rebuilt. Michael J. Fox entered an established production with little time to win over castmates who had already shot pivotal scenes. There were doubts, some creative clashes, and awkward first takes, but over time, mutual respect began to grow. Fox's relentless energy and professionalism proved contagious. Christopher Lloyd's eccentricity meshed perfectly with Fox's humor. Lea Thompson adapted her performance to Fox's style. What began as uncertainty evolved into something electric. The result, a cast whose on-screen relationships felt authentic, layered, and unforgettable, crafted not from instant rapport, but from a journey through real human dynamics.